Okay, recording has started. Welcome to the Division of Adult Education monthly webinar for February. This session is being recorded. By participating in this session, you are consenting to the recording, retention, and use of this session. That includes the items that are in the chat. No other recording of this session is allowed. This includes any type of AI note-taking. So if you have those on, please turn them off. Thank you. Oops, sorry. These are the items that we'll look at today. I do have one division staff update. I would like to welcome Ann Pizzoka to the division as the Professional Development System Coordinator. Ann, if you are there, could you turn on your camera and kind of wave at people? I don't know. I can't see anything because I've got the slides on.
Hi. I know there are a lot of people in here, but I want to say hi to everybody. I recognize some names and I'm excited to be working with you all again. And for those of you who haven't met yet, I'm looking forward to collaborating.
Thanks so much, Ann. And yeah, Ann, you facilitated at least one of the courses in the PD portal, correct?
Yes.
So, and she also has dealt with some overseen local grants in the city of Philadelphia. So she's been able to, she has experience in government grant management as well. So thank you, Ann. We're happy to have you on.
Thanks.
Okay. So I wanted to give everyone a snapshot of where we are data-wise, at least. So far in 24-25, I pulled the data yesterday afternoon. So I'm considering this data through, say, the very end of January, beginning of February, since you have the 2 weeks to enter data. So for enrollment, I was able to pull data for all 4 grant types. So the adult basic education, which is the 064, Section 243 IELCE, tutoring program for adults, and the family literacy. That contracted column reflects what we contract with you for. And those are unique contracted individuals, right? So we do ideally want that number of 13,003 to be 13,003 unique individuals. We know that there is some sharing of students, but our goal is to have about, we've contracted with local programs to serve about 13,000 individuals as a whole. I'm sorry, not 13,000. That's for adult ed by itself. Winter is getting to me. So, the total there, and I can't do the math on the top of my head, so I apologize. That's the contracted amount. What I'm trying to clarify is we do not have a contracted number with the federal government. So we get funding from the government, and we have outcomes for the individuals that we serve, but we are not required to serve a specific number of individuals. We're not required to enroll a specific number of individuals to meet federal targets. So that contracted number is the number that we have contracted with you in the contracts. So far, our enrollment across all 4 grants is around 11,800. Those enrolled numbers on the table include people who are served in more than one grant. These are not necessarily unique individuals, because when I pull it from eData and the Access template, it's hard for me to easily weed out the duplicate students. So, our 11,800 is probably a little high. It's probably a little bit less than that because that probably includes individuals who are served by more than one agency or are served at the same agency under more than one grant. So that enrolled column does include some duplicated individuals. Nonetheless, for the major, I would say all of the grants are pretty much on target. At this time of year, by the end of January, we would have expected you to be at a minimum around 60% of enrollment, and so it looks like we're on target there. For individual agencies, I found that 22 of our 064 grantees are above 60% of contracted enrollment. All 5 of our Section 243 IELCE grantees are above that 65%, and 3 of the 6 tutoring program grantees are above the 60% of contracted enrollment. For comparison, last year, our total number of participants at the federal level, we refer to them as participants, which is the individuals with 12 or more hours of instruction. Our final participant total was 16,575. So kind of looking at year to date, we're probably on target to meet that number, even if we acknowledge that there might be a drop off in enrollments since January. Now, on the other side, we do have 5 adult ed grantees who are still below 55% of contracted enrollment. So we need those programs to work on bringing more individuals in. I don't know if there are any thoughts or comments about the enrollment slide. Okay. So this is where we are with EFL Gain. And this is EFL Gain based on pre-post testing. So this does not include the other options for educational functioning level gain or measurable skill gain. This is purely EFL Gain based on pre-post testing. For context, our measurable skill gain target for 24-25 as negotiated with the U.S. Department of Education is 37%. So we have to be 37% measurable skill gains. That would be, if you, on the slide, the next to the last column where it says EFL Gain, that EFL Gain column accounts for by far the majority of our measurable skill gains. So we definitely need to get that number increased. Last year, we actually hit 37%. We were slightly over 37% measurable skill gain. So if we can do what we did last year, we will meet our target. So as you can see in this table, we're showing, the first column is the enrolled from the prior slide. Then that second column is the number of enrolled students who have, as of yesterday, a pre-post test, at least one pre-post test pair in eData. So if you have assessments that you have not yet entered into eData, it doesn't reflect those. And of course, anyone who doesn't have a pre-post test pair is not included in there. So those are the number of individuals in each of those grants that have been pre and post tested. Again, any students who are shared across agencies or across grants will be duplicated in that column. So they're probably actually fewer students, a little bit fewer. And then that third column is the percentage of enrolled students who have been post-tested. That's not saying whether or not they got a gain or not. That's just the percentage of our students who we have post-tested. So far this year, except for the IELCE grantees, and those students tend to get greater intensity of instruction, we've post-tested a quarter to a third of our students. And that's important. I'll get into some more data a little bit later. Fourth column is the number who showed an EFL gain based on pre-post testing. And then the fifth column is the percentage. Again, our target for the year is 37% measurable skill gain. This fifth column, pre-EFL gain based on pre-post testing, accounts for the majority of our EFL gains, so we need to up those. Then that last column is what we call Table 4B. As a reminder, Table 4B looks at only those individuals who were pre and post tested, and what percentage of those individuals showed an EFL gain, right? So that the fifth column is of all of the enrolled students, including those who did not have a post-test, what is the percentage of our enrolled students who have an EFL gain? So that's going to be much lower because it includes all the people who haven't been post-tested. Table 4B is the individuals who have been post-tested. It's that subset. So they have the ability to have shown an EFL gain. And we are below 60% in all of those. Last year, our Table 4B as a state was a little over 60%. And our target in the policy C100 is actually that agencies will hit 70%. So we're pretty low in that area. Some additional data to kind of provide context for the table. As a state, 44.6% of students who have reached the minimum number of hours for a post-test do not have one, or at least there's not one in eData. So I'm not talking about students who are below that minimal level. These are the students who have reached the minimum number of hours to be post-tested, do not have a post-test in eData. Now, we recognize that not everyone who reaches the minimum number of hours is ready to be post-tested. However, there are 1,345 unique, because I did some number crunching, and these are unique individuals. There are 1,345 adults with greater than 60 hours with no post-test in the system. And there are 318 adults with 100 or more hours with no post-test in the system. And 318 adults doesn't sound like a lot, but if 50% of them show an EFL gain, that's probably around a percentage point in our outcomes. So, need you to look at your data. Going a step further, I did some calculations, and if we had to meet our measurable skill gain target of 37% with EFL gains alone, right? So if our Table 4B rate, again, a reminder, that's the percent of post-tested students who show an EFL gain. If our Table 4B rate stays at around 57%, so 57% of students who are post-tested show a gain, then we must post-test no less than 65% of our students. So if we want to hit 37% measurable skill gain target with EFL gains alone, at our current rate of 57% of post-tested students showing a gain, we have to post-test no less than 65% of our students. And right now we're at less than half of that. If we hit last year's Table 4B, which was 60%, then we would still need to post-test at least 62% of of our students. And if we manage to hit our 70% target for Table 4B, we would still have to post-test at least 53% of our students in order to hit that 37%. Now, in reality, there are additional ways that students can show measurable skill gain to help us reach our measurable skill gain target of 37%. For example, a student can show an EFL gain by passing a high school equivalency subtest, or enrolling in post-secondary education or training after starting adult education. Actually, earning the high school equivalency credential is a measurable skill gain in itself. So for students who are working towards their high school equivalency credential, that the EFL gain by pre-post testing is less important because they may show either an EFL gain by passing a subtest, or they may show a measurable skill gain by passing the test. So if you have students who are focused on that and you think they're going to take the test and pass, you're not going to look at those students and say, oh, we have to get them post-tested, because they've got other ways to show measurable skill gain. However, by far the majority of our students are lower level ABE and ESL students, or they are higher level individuals who already have a high school diploma. But for those lower level ABE students and for ESL students, the EFL gain by pre-post testing is really the only option they have to show measurable skill gain. So those agencies serving a lot of ESL students, a lot of lower ABE students, and that includes our largest programs who account for the majority of our students. And the large programs are therefore responsible for carry much more of the burden for showing success in our measurable skill gains, right? So you account for more students, so you account for more of our outcome. So if you don't meet the target, we as a state don't meet the target. We could have a couple small agencies doing great on educational functioning level and measurable skill gain, but if our large programs are not doing well, that affects us as a whole state. So you need to really look at your data, look at your instruction, retention, how are you supporting your students, and work to make sure that we are getting the necessary outcomes. And also, are you getting the data in, right? So if you're post-testing students and they're showing gains, but you're not getting the data in, then that's a problem as well, right? Because if it's not in e-data, it didn't happen. So, I think enrollment-wise, we're on track. We're doing okay. Most of you are doing okay. And let's really kind of sit down, look at the data, and see if we can make sure that we increase the percentage of people who are post-tested, improve our table 4B, and as a result, improve our EFL gains and measurable skill gains. And moving on to a much more less didactic, pedantic, and more positive note. I'm sure many of you know that in the governor's proposed 25-26 budget, he has included a line item for adult. Well, I mean, there's always a line item for adult and family literacy, but is in budgeted $22,728,000 for the adult and family literacy line item. That is an increase of almost 6.5 million, almost 40% increase in the line item. That 22.728 is not all for our grants. Every year since 12, 13 or 13, 14, there has been wording in the fiscal code to fund 2 after-school programs for a total of $800,000. Each one gets $400,000. That money is put into our line item, but it is through fiscal code, it is specifically allocated to these 2 after-school programs. It will also include an additional $1,050,000 high school equivalency test fee subsidy, which we are still working on getting up and running. But that does leave almost $21 million for our grants. As a reminder, this is the governor's proposed budget. After his budget address, his proposed budget goes to the legislators, or the legislature, and the House and the Senate review, and they kind of come up with their own ideas. They can definitely change the amounts. Happens all the time. It's part of the process. There are budget hearings in which the secretaries of each of the departments, and in our case, that will be Acting Secretary Dr. Carrie Rowe, they go in front of the House and the Senate and they talk about why they need the money and what we're going to do with it, big picture wise. But that's the administration. Legislature can do what it wants. It is very, very important for you as recipients of the funding to let your legislators and elected officials know the positive impact that the funding has. And, invite them to your programs. Let them know what you're doing with the current funding and what you could do with more funding. I understand that some of you are probably with organizations that will limit what you can do. So maybe talk to them about, is it possible to just simply invite an elected official to come and observe a class and meet your students to see what you're doing so it doesn't come across as lobbying. We call it advocacy, not lobbying. I recognize that different people have different restrictions, but to the extent possible, please, please, please let your elected officials know the impact that this can have. I did want to share something with you. I want to thank Destiny for bringing this to my attention. The governor actually mentioned adult education in his speech and had a student attend, and he has shared it on his Facebook. I'm going to, hopefully you can hear it. Oh, you can't. Oh, here we go.
Amanda, we still can't hear the video. Might be something.
Okay, I'm saying
just
people,
listen.
let me put this in. Copy. Sorry, I wish you could have heard that. I'll put it in there. Hopefully that'll work for you to be able to see it. But it was really nice to hear adult education mentioned and to have an adult education success story called out and invited to attend. I believe the PACE Advocacy Committee is having a meeting tomorrow at 11 to discuss next steps. So I'll just say if you're interested in that, you may want to reach out to PACE and find out how you can join that. Okay, that is the end of mine, and I will turn it over to Mary and the panel.
Thanks, Amanda. Actually, we are going to have Cheryl Parker lead the conversation with our panelists. So I'm actually going to turn it over to Cheryl.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. We appreciate your joining today. Good to feel the synergy when we're all together. Thank you. Our topic for this panel was suggested during monthly call chats. We always want to know topics that you'd like to discuss, so please continue to let us advisors know. And special thanks to our panelists today. From Altoona Area School District, Tina Swineford. From Lincoln IU 12, Sharon Hagenberger. and from Luzerne Community College, Kim Gavlik. We have questions that each panelist will address. Audience members, please write additional questions in the chat. Tina, would you start us off? Which assessments are you using this year and why? Was this a change from previous years? And if so, why did you decide to make a change? Tina?
Hi, everybody. We use the TABE 1112 for our ABE ASE students. Excuse me, I'm fighting a cold. And we started providing ESL services this year. So we are using the CASAS reading steps for the ESL assessment. So the TABE is not new for us. We've been using it since the 1112 came out in 2019. And prior to that, we used the 910. The CASAS is new for us. And we chose the CASAS just based on me talking to a couple other ESL programs and just doing a little bit of research on what our choices were.
Thank you, Tina. Sharon, tell us what you do.
Good morning, everyone. The new CASAS ESL, obviously, we switched to. We were using the old Life and Works, and when the new one came out, the Reading Steps, we added that or changed over to that. But we also added the Listening Steps piece. In previous webinars that other presenters have done in the past year or two, someone mentioned about having this extra step of not just looking at their reading scores, but listening, but also at their listening scores, because some people are just really good at picking out words. They have enough Latin and background to pick out things. And so they were getting sort of inflated reading scores. So we added the second component of the listening steps this year for the first time. So we're using two pieces to get a better idea. And whichever presenters gave us that idea a number of months ago, thank you very much. It's really paying off. The other thing, we were using TABE 1112. We had used TABE 910 when I first came on board at the IU, moved to 1112, and it's just not been an easy thing for our students. It's much longer than it used to be, and it was frustrating a lot of people. So when the reading goals 2 and the math goals 2 were approved under the new CASAS for ABE, ASE, we switched to that. Now we still have people that pre-tested in TABE 1112 that were post-testing in that, but for anyone that came on new from July 1st to now, we've been using the new CASAS assessments for reading and math, and so far it's just really made a big difference. The other piece too is from a accessibility point and money point. We wanted to go with more computer assessments, and the TABE 1112 tickets you had to buy at least 500 a year, and they only were good for a year. They expired, whereas the CASAS tickets are good for no matter which assessment you use, whether you use it for ESL or ABE. The tickets are good for any of those, and they never expire. So fiscally, it just made sense to my team and I that we go that route.
Thanks, Sharon. Appreciate that. Kim, what's going on at Luzerne?
Hi, everyone. So similar to what's been already shared, we didn't make a big change this year with our assessments. CASAS has been the assessment of choice from my perspective at Luzerne since I started in the 90s. So we've always used CASAS. Obviously, we had to make a change this year to STEPS, and also the CASAS goals Math 2 is also the new form of math assessment that we use with CASAS. Our subcontractor, though, CASAS was new for them. They got some more ESL participants, so they needed to switch over to the CASAS, and they do continue to use TABE for their ABE students. But here in Luzerne, we use CASAS for everyone, and we've always kind of done that since I've been in the program. We did switch last year, not really this year, but last year, to doing e-testing for all of our students. We were e-testing for our ABE HSE students, thinking that it would be a little bit too much for our ESL students, so we weren't really doing it as much. But then we wanted to introduce that and get that started. So all of our students now do e-testing. We don't do any test booklets, unless there's some sort of exception there. But for the most part, everybody is doing e-testing. We like using the e-testing, obviously, because there's a lot of more ease of scoring with e-testing. We can provide immediate feedback to our students. We do like the ability to do the listening test as well. And we felt that, you know, it was a little challenging still for our lower level ESL students. So we only e-test with listening for students that are level 3 reading and higher. So that kind of helped take some of that frustration, I think, away from the students around doing the listening test. But for the most part, we like using CASAS. It's, you know, it's not really a big change for us, but it does help, though, having that ability to use the e-test piece. Everything is much more automated. Post-testing goes much more smoothly. We don't have to worry about giving the wrong test forms. So all of that is really a benefit for us.
Thank you, Kim. Moving on to question 2 then. Sharon, will you begin with the second question? What are the pros and cons of the assessments that you're using? You mentioned that in your first answer. Do you have anything else to add?
Oh, yes. I've directed our case managers to get as much feedback from the students to see if they like the new testing programs and assessments. And the big answer is absolutely. I mean, so many of them are saying that they just understand it better. It's paced really well. It's much more colorful and inviting than the TABE. And these are some comments from people who have done the TABE pre-test and then the TABE post-test, but now we've been switching them over to the CASAS, so they've had to take another assessment, and they're the ones I really wanted to hear feedback from since they've done both. And they just really like it. They understand it better, they said. It's so much better than it's used to be, was a common comment. Because when we said, you know, here's what you're going to have to do, they were cringing a bit. But when they saw the new assessment, they were like, oh, well, this is really nice. The other pieces for pros, we're seeing more students score at level 6. We never got anybody scoring at level 6 on the table at 12.
Okay.
So it's helping students feel, and even our case managers, these are attainable, and so on. So we're seeing that. We've had a few people that started, we do have some of the paper copies. We use the e-tickets, and some people like the option of the choice. But we've had a couple people who have done one on paper and then done one on the computer just to compare, and they are aligned perfectly. The other piece we like about the CASAS is the locator is only about 30 minutes on paper and 15 minutes on computer. Whereas TABE took us 45 minutes to an hour to give people. So, but we've noticed that there is no scoring difference between the 30 minutes or the 15. They score the same score. So we like that part. They also can use the calculator for all of the math. And even though a lot of them don't need it, they like that crutch. Because when we told them they can have the calculator, which they couldn't do with TABE, they very much like that idea. Now, there's only a couple cons that we've come across so far. For those who, we've only had about 30 that have had enough hours from July 1st to now to pre-test and post-test using the new CASAs. And we're not seeing the larger gains that we saw with TABE. So we don't know if that's just, internally within the test itself, it's just how it's designed, but they're not post-testing it quite as high, showing quite as high gains on the CASAS as they have on TABE. But as we test more people, that data should change. And then for ESL, the level A, we've had some issues with really low and pre-literate people struggling to even get a score. So we do a lot with one-on-one with them. We know there's an amendment. We work, like I said, one-on-one with them to finally get something that we can get them in the program. And that's about where we are with pros and cons.
Thank you, Sharon, for that.
Mm-hmm.
Kim, what can you tell us?
Some of the things that I asked our staff, to give me some feedback because they're the ones doing the work on a daily basis. Just a few cons first. I think, even though it may initially feel that you're spending a lot, I feel we're spending a lot more using the e-test vouchers because we now are testing all of our students with e-test. It does, I think, balance out in the end, but it does have I think, a little bit higher expense. You have to budget a little bit more to keep your test vouchers out there because like I said, we're doing 4 tests, with each, if they do a pre and post, like they're doing 4 tests with us. So that does add up. The other cons that we notice a lot of times are students' tech skills. So if we're doing e-testing with everyone, we do have to, sometimes take into consideration that they're, coming in with little to no digital literacy, not able to use the mouse, or, so we've had some real frustrations with some very, very low literacy students when they're doing the e-testing, especially our ESL. And then also just in-house, we do have limited availability at times for labs. So we try to adapt and accommodate and use laptops and things to set up so that we can at least do, our testing, since we are dependent on, having a computer lab for this type of test. And then there's just, the everyday tech glitches that come up with e-testing and technology in general. So, I mean, for us, the pros far outweigh the cons. And I think some of the different comments that we got are, the goals tests are aligned to the Common Core. So the College and Career Readiness Standards. And I think that helps our instructors when they're lesson planning, because then there's not as much like, oh, am I hitting the targets for CASAS and the CCRS? In this way, goals is aligned and steps is aligned to the ELPS. So those English language proficiency standards are there, and they're being addressed. If we are, touching on one, we're touching on the other, where I think in the past with the CASAS, that wasn't the case. Like, we always felt like we were trying to pull in, 20 different things to make sure we were addressing so that people could go up on the CASAS, as well as make sure that we're addressing those other standards. We are seeing some differences in our math gains because they have broken down the levels more now. There used to be 4, now there's 5, and we are seeing some improvements in our math gains. So that is a good thing. And also our listening tests seem to be where we see the gains more than the reading for our ESL students. I also like to mention that we really enjoy using the student profiles that are associated with the CASAS. They give our students and our staff a really good snapshot of where they're at with their skills. It helps with lesson planning, and those are all available through the TOPS Pro system that is connected with CASAS. And there is a quick search for resources. So you can go out to a web link that's available through CASAS that staff could do some alignment with resources. So you can do a search for, different levels. You can do a search for different competencies that they need to address. So that is a nice other feature that CASAS provides.
Thank you for that, Kim. Tina, what do you think about pros and cons?
Well, Sharon and Kim kind of touched on the cons of TABE. It is very time consuming to administer. For example, the reading locator is a half hour, but then the reading TABE is another 2 hours. So it's for us, it was next to impossible to administer reading, math, and language pre-testing in a sitting. It would have been 6 hours of testing, and the students would have been overwhelmed and never come back. So we adjust our pre-testing to just include the reading and math locator for everybody pre-testing, and then we give the math TABE pre-test. And then later on during class, if the student is working just on reading or just on language, or even the high school equivalency students who are working on the reading and the social studies, the language arts related subjects, we'll give them the reading TABE so that we have a math TABE and a reading TABE in eData, so that when post-testing comes about, we can say, which subject are we going to post-test? Which subject have they been spending the most time studying? Some of the pros of TABE are that we're familiar with it. Our teachers use the individual profile reports as diagnostics, so that when the students enter on day one, the teachers have a general idea of their math and reading levels so that they can get them started in meaningful work that day. We have many TABE-aligned resources. Since we adopted it 6 years ago, we feel very confident with aligning our instruction with the assessment. And all of the career links, one-stop partners, adult ed, Title II agencies in our workforce development region use the TABE as the basic skills assessment. So that consistency is definitely a pro across partners and receiving referrals. Some of our Title I partners are trained to give the TABE, so we're able to bring those referrals in with the TABE test that they were given at the career link. CASAS, we're still getting to know CASAS. Pros are that the tests are short and sweet. And there's a nice report that tells you the next assigned test so that you know which post-test to give them, because there are times, as you all know, that the scaled score in a level hits a ceiling and you can't get to the next level in that particular form, whether it's TABE or CASAS. So that next assigned test chart is a nice feature in CASAS TOPS Pro. It tells you if you tested them in 623 level B, it'll tell you if you need to post-test them in a level C. So I know we're short on time, so I'm gonna end there. Maybe we'll get to question 3.
Thank you, Tina.
Mm-hmm.
And in question 3, Kim, what are you finding as the challenging levels for demonstrating EFL gains? And how are teachers helping students progress, specifically at those challenging levels?
So I think across the board with ABE and ESL, our intermediate levels are the most challenging. And we feel like, to help the students make progress in those areas, we, really started focusing on those student profiles, helping our, staff to understand like what areas are needed for improvement. We also have conversations, internally with our staff around post-testing and when's a good time. And, once those test times are determined, we also have some conversations with the students, sometimes uncomfortable conversations, because they may have tested into a higher level class, which we've, been trying to split up our levels a little differently with our instructional sessions. And, looking at a student who may have tested into a higher level, And, are they ready to move on? Or is it not really a good time? Do they need a little push? They're like, they're stuck in a class that, isn't really meeting their needs anymore. They need to be moved up. So we feel like, taking that approach has really helped to figure out where the students are and where our instruction is at, and are we meeting it at the right place?
No, thank you, Kim. Tina, what are you seeing at Altoona?
I agree with Kim. The intermediate levels are very tricky to get those gains. On the TABE math pretest, getting from a level 4 to a 5 is a big challenge. It covers a wide range of grade level material, but also it's a 59-point range if they test in at the lower end of that range. So to try to get them to a 5 is very often a challenge. One of the things our teachers are doing to help the students progress at those challenging levels is recognizing and reminding themselves that they can't do it alone. The student really, really has to be encouraged and equipped to take ownership of their learning beyond what's happening in class. Because we all know sometimes the students can only get to class once a week, and that's not nearly enough to make progress, especially in those challenging levels. So our teachers are really focusing this year on the supplemental distance learning. We're using a wide range of the curriculum. The IXL gives just the repetition that the students need to get really the fluency and practice in some of those skills. And then on the other hand, Con and Essential Ed gives the step-by-step instruction with practice. So depending on what the student needs is what the teacher assigns. And we're seeing a lot of really good improvement. We're not sure yet with the post-testing, but we're seeing improvement in students doing SDL, taking accountability, and admitting that they're seeing the progress. They're seeing improvement in themselves because they're working at home. So it's a team effort with what the teachers are doing and with what the students have to be accountable for as well.
Good to hear. Sharon, what are you seeing at Lincoln?
Pretty much the same thing. It's that intermediate group. And now in my ESL data, it's around our level 4 intermediate, but I also have a new teacher that's only been teaching in that. He's brand new. He's only been teaching in that large group for about 5 months now. And so, as my case manager said, he's still working on getting his sea legs, but they're not losing ground. We just haven't seen the gains like we had with the more experienced teacher last year. As far as things that we're helping, the CASAS has sample items that they recommend, even in the training that all our staff had to do. They recommend sending out those CASAS sample items for teachers to use with their students. So we've done that. We use Aztec's SDL software and really push students to do that as much as they can for the math and reading and so on. And then we've just added NGen for our ESL students, the former Voxy software, to try to get them working more online and doing more SDL on their own also. So it's that intermediate level, and I don't have, that's, as someone said, we have a lot of TABE 11, 12 supplemental materials, and I'm in the process of changing over to the new CASAS materials. So I'm hoping at PACE they have a good stand with new materials, because we've been using like TABE Tutor and things like that, and we haven't found good CASAS materials yet. So as soon as those things are out, I'll be looking at using some of them.
Okay, thank you. Our fourth question is actually my favorite, but we only have about a minute for each one. Tina, let me start with you. How does your program prepare students for post-testing? Do you teach test taking strategies as well as content? Do you use practice tests? What test preparation methods do you use?
So we absolutely teach test taking strategies that would apply to any high stakes test, not just the TABE or the CASAS or the GED. But the instruction has to match the assessment. And we talk about that all the time at our meetings and just as informal chats. And what I mean by that is the level of difficulty, critical thinking, the shades of meaning have to happen intentionally during class instruction, class practice, so that when they get to those assessments, and we know sometimes those assessment questions are like the gotcha game, what they're doing in
Yeah.
class has to be as challenging and as tricky to think through as what they see on the assessment. So, for example, when you're teaching area, we know it's not enough just to teach them how to find length times width equals area. You got to throw in and support them to think through what happens if you have a wall that's a rectangle that has a 4x3 window in it, and now you need to know how much wallpaper to buy. Those are the kinds of questions that throw all of our students when they see it for the first time. So those are the levels and challenges that we make sure in class they've seen it in addition, so that when they get to the assessment, they're ready for it. And then just test taking skills and strategies, such as in class, having them justify their thinking, explain why the answer is right or wrong. Ask every student for a response. Even if you get the right response the first time you ask a student, go to the next student. What do you think it is? What do you think it is? What do you think it is? So that they get some confidence in their thinking and hearing how other people thought about it. So the instruction has to match the assessment so that when they get to those assessment questions, they've already had experience at those higher levels of thinking and rigor.
Thank you. Thank you. Sharon, what happens at Lincoln?
Well, we do the same thing. I've always been a proponent of inserting test taking strategies into everyday instruction, get them used to terms. That's the hardest part on a lot of these assessments. They'll suddenly throw a term in that throws our students, like the word passage. Read this passage. Well, if they don't know what a passage is, if they've never seen it before, then it just throws them. So we try to look at the language of the assessments, of any assessment, and get them ready. We use the Aztec practice tests. We purchase, any kind of practice tests that are out there in the style of the tests we're giving. But we don't give any preset pre-tests of CASAS or TABE or any of those, but we give things in the style of. Same thing with GED and HiSET. It's the style of. And so that makes a big thing. I have one tip that my case managers wanted me to tell everybody, and that when you're using the computers with your CASAS students or any of your students, make the cursor bigger and a different color. That's our biggest struggle, that our new people who have never touched a computer before, or people who are not as confident, they've done so much better since we've made the cursor bigger and adjusted the colors so they can find it. So that was a tip I wanted to squeeze in. So thank you.
Thank you. Good tip. One that I use too. Kim, what's going on at the community college with test preparation?
Just something like a little bit in addition to what everyone else has shared, focusing more on the ESL side of things. We have found that the CASAS sample test items are a nice way to help the students, especially if they are not comfortable with the computer, giving them an opportunity to do some practice questions online. Some of the resources that we use include test prep questions, such as the Ventures materials. That is one of the main curriculum that we use here. And also there's a program called ELI, and I forget what it stands for, but it's ELLII. They have ESL lesson plans, and they do have a specific CASAS steps test prep in there. So our instructors feel like those really help to provide some opportunities for the students to see what the test is like, see what the test questions look like, and practice, those multiple choice skills. I think that for our ESL students is the most challenging piece.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Another terrific discussion today. You are the reason we keep coming back for more. It certainly takes all of us working together, doesn't it? Thank you. Thank you very much. Amanda, anything to send us on our way?
Just if there are any questions, we can open it up for questions. It is after noon, so if we can let people go. And what I would say is that the cursor thing is great. I have a large purple cursor and it really does help. So so we can wait for another minute or two just to see if there are any questions. Otherwise, I do not have anything more for today. So thank you all very much for your time. And again, we truly appreciate the work that you and your local programs do and the commitment that your students are making to their learning. Thank you all.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Juan.
Thank you.